Hello everyone and welcome to another Folk Talk Academy lecture. My name is Tom Besford. I am the Chief Executive of English Folk Expo and over the summer of 2021 we are presenting a series of around 50 or so lectures about the music industry, all available for free to watch on folktalkacademy.com. Before I introduce today's speaker, just a little bit of information about how the session today will work. There is a Q&A function available on the screen. So if you do have any questions, there will be around 15 minutes at the end for conversation through there. So please put any questions into the Q&A box. In the chat, I'll be posting a link to a fully adjustable page of closed captions, and there are also closed captions available via Zoom as well using the CC button. The talk itself will be about 45 minutes there or thereabouts, and then with a little bit of time at the end, and will be available to watch again on folktalkacademy.com in the next few days. That's probably all from me. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Roger Wilson from Black Lives in Music, who's going to talk to us today about that organization and also some of the work around how we can make folk music a much more diverse place. Roger, if you'd like to turn your camera on. Hi, welcome.
Good to
I'm
see
going
you,
to I'm going to hand straight over to you. We'll see you at the end.
Thanks very much, Tom. Good afternoon. I'm very, very pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Roger Wilson, and I'm co-founder of a new organization called Black Lives in Music. I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and then I'd like to talk to you about folk music in the United Kingdom and the need to decolonize. That is, of course, the central focus of why we are here today. So first of all, to our organization, Black Lives in Music. Black Lives in Music, or BLiM, was founded in just the back end of last year, 2019, in fact, and is a direct response to the lived experience of myself and my fellow co-founder, Cherise Beaumont. As Black British people involved in the British music industry and on both sides of the stage, we've experienced and understand the difficulties of racial inequality in music across this sector. My own background as a young person growing up in inner city London at a time where musical instrument education was actually free some time ago, and it meant so much to me. It changed so much for me in terms of my life. I could easily have been on the other side of the tracks, and yet actually having that opportunity to learn an instrument enabled me an opportunity that I would never otherwise have thought possible. I went on to become a musician, working in a very wide spectrum in terms of the music sector, and as I say, both sides of the stage. I've been a musician, I've been a tour manager, I've also been an orchestra manager, an artist manager, and also an administrator. So I feel really quite well placed to talk about the Black experience in terms of the music industry. And I feel that it's important that the lived experience of Black musicians and creators is really taken into account. The lived experience of Black lives in music is key to supporting the sector in the important change that is needed. And why is that important? Well, we know that we need to understand the plight of those that are underrepresented. If we don't understand that situation, the plight of those involved, then how can we accurately help them? How can we effectively support them? How can we effectively make change? Anything else is just trying, just really having a stab at trying to make things better. We need to listen to people. It's how we make change, and we make it effectively. Black Lives in Music addresses the current inequality of opportunity for Black people aspiring to be involved in the music industry. We champion the cause of improved opportunities for Black people to learn musical instruments at grassroots level. We're beginning discussions with national music hubs and community music groups to find new ways and initiatives to stimulate and increase participation in music making by young people of colour. We know from first-hand experience that the experience of music making at any level can help any individual in the areas of self-confidence, self-esteem, working in a group, self-discipline, developing social skills. Playing an instrument brings a whole wealth of benefits to the individual, and we believe that no one should miss out on this opportunity. Black Lives in Music is encouraging the industry to provide better professional development opportunities and to help realise equality for Black professionals in all areas of the UK music industry. We see a paucity of colour in many areas of this industry, whether that's in technical management or in governance. We believe a more conscious effort is needed to help change this. We believe that all music organisations in the United Kingdom should create a level playing field for everyone to have an equal chance to succeed. Black Lives in Music stands for equal opportunities for Black people to be able to work successfully in the United Kingdom music industry without being the subject of discrimination. We're looking at every aspect of this progression, right from grassroots through to being a professional. And why is that? Because we actually understand that that talent pipeline is so important. We can't expect to see something different at the end of that talent pipeline if we're not able to see real diversity at the beginning of that talent pipeline. So how are we going about our work? What does Black Lives in Music do? We're beginning to support young people of colour to participate in and enjoy grassroots music making. We believe it's important to focus on the talent pipeline. We won't ultimately see a diverse workforce if there is not a diverse group of people starting on that journey at grassroots level. We want to support opportunities for dedicated young musicians of colour to transition to conservatoires and higher education studies in music with mentoring and support. And mentoring and support is so important for that young individual. I can remember myself as a undergraduate student, one of a very, very small number of people of colour at the Conservatoire that I attended. And that mentoring makes a difference. Support makes a difference. It helps to give confidence. It helps to advocate for that individual, to give them the step up that they need. There are people who are people of colour, and there are people who are from socio-economically challenged backgrounds. The two, in terms of the plight of those two groups, is not mutually exclusive. And this support is important. We see that in conservatoires, under 3% of professorial staff are actually people of colour. That's people who are Black, Asian, or from ethnically diverse backgrounds. That is to say 97% of that conservatoire professorial community is white. And this is where we need to begin to see those changes happen, so that when we're talking about mentoring and we're talking about support, we're able to give people the real mentoring and support that they need, that is effective for them to be able to make the progression that they need. And when I talk about the progression that they need, we also need to talk about the progression that organizations need. They need to break down their walls and they need to build relationships. Through our own developing relationships, we are promoting and facilitating increased invisibility for promoters to program from a diverse pool of talent and in turn, increase the talent pool and the audiences for live music. This is so important. How often do we see an arts festival where programmed is someone from the Young Concert Artists Trust or someone who has just won the BBC Young Musician of the Year? We need to try harder to look at emerging talent and find that talent wherever it may be, so that we can support their progress and help them to aspire and to achieve. BLiM wish to help young music professionals of colour to have opportunities to become part of a more diverse sector and to feel that they belong in more diverse organisations. We have a high-profile task force of musicians and industry professionals to advocate for our work. And advocacy is so important. We can see how a 15-year-old Marcus Rashford wanting to play football for Manchester United is unable to do anything about his own plight in terms of wanting to eat 3 square meals a day, and unfortunately is unable to do so because of his own family challenge in terms of their socioeconomic background. And yet the 23-year-old Marcus Rashford, superstar international sports person, has a direct line to Boris Johnson and Downing Street, and is able to advocate for the change that's so necessary and is so important, and has been so effective in supporting the plight of so many young people under the breadline. So we know that advocacy works, and we are utilizing that to our own advantage. We're helping organizations by signposting and supporting with diversity training, mentoring and support programs. And this is important. Organizations don't always know where to start. What's the first step? Who do I speak to? What's the first action? It's so important that we are here and we can help organizations to take that first step and to make that first step with confidence. For them to know where they can go to if they want to have diversity training. And let's face it, many organizations do need to have diversity training. And why? Because they lack the lived experience within their own organizations. We're happy to help with mentoring, and we're happy to help with support programs. We're also happy to help with recruitment. And already we've shown a real positivity in progress in terms of helping organizations that are partnered with us in terms of making good and real progress. We wish to be a part of a wider and more successful narrative for change, and we now have a long list of partner organizations who we are working with throughout the UK. We support participation, creation and education for all in the performing arts. We also promote well-being. We know that a disproportionate number of people of colour suffer with poor mental health. We wish to develop our support for musicians of colour. So I've said all of this, but how do we know about the problems of diversity in our own industry? How can we be most effective if we don't accurately understand the problems? Black Lives in Music will roll out 2 annual national surveys. The first of which about the lived experience of Black music creators and industry professionals has been completed and will be reporting soon. The other, a survey on diversity in organizations, will launch in the coming months. It's important that we have this inside information and that we can produce key data that has never before been recorded in such a comprehensive way. This information will be used for the advancement of the cause of building an inclusive community in the interests of everyone. And I do mean everyone, and we do mean an inclusive community. We need the naysayers, those who are just refusing to understand, to acknowledge the problems that are there, to be compelled by data, the one forensic piece of information that cannot be denied. We need people to be compelled, those who are more akin and supportive of our cause, to want to do more, to realize that it's important to do more. We saw so much happen on the 25th of May last year by way of revolt, repulsion at some really quite horrible images shown on television. And I'm of course talking about the heinous murder of George Floyd. We've seen so much by way of what organizations have tried to do in terms of their impassioned pleas of support and the black squares that we've seen. But what happens next? How can we actually make the change that is so important, that is so necessary? And how do organizations go forward? Because we understand that there has been a flurry of pleas and statements, but words are simply not enough. We need to do more. We need to look at our organizations, we need to look at our spaces, we need to look at our art form, and we need to understand that change has to come. We've managed to colonize this art form, we've managed to colonize our spaces, we've managed to colonize our organizations. And popular consensus suggests that a period going forward of decolonization is now so important. And this is something I feel very, very strongly about. As someone who's made a pathway through life as a musician, administrator, I've made that pathway pretty much seeing very few people who look like me, seeing the music that I'm working in reflected in a community that doesn't necessarily look like me at all. It's enforced me to ask a lot of questions, and I'm so pleased that we are able to be a part of this discussion and a very much needed wider discussion. So Black Lives in Music is clearly something that is working for change, an organization that is working for change, an organization that is helping to support other organizations for a more inclusive community. The United Kingdom has changed over time in so many ways and continues to do so. Whether we look at technology, commerce, fashion, music, everything has changed. It's also changed in terms of the makeup of its people. London now boasts 44% of its demographic to be from Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse background. That's a really quite striking percentage. UK demographics are fast changing, as is its cultural identity, which is changing too. The way people speak, greet each other, the clothes we wear, the way we wear our hair, the music we listen to, all suggest that we are subliminally adopting aspects of cultural influences from elsewhere. As the UK welcomes and acknowledges people from around the world, so does it embrace societal change. But some things have always seemed to remain very British, and we need to ask ourselves, is that right? Should it remain that way? We've seen how in classical music, there has been a systemic process of preserving the history of this music in a single image, that of the white male creator. Like the dinosaurs, some of the world's great, and I do mean great, Black classical composers are now beginning to be discovered again, and history is being rewritten. The names of Chevalier de Saint-Georges, William Grant Still, and Florence Price, yes, a woman and a Black woman too, are now more widely known as their music is heard once again in UK concert halls. It's just such a great shame that we've had to wait so long to find out about these people, to discover that these people existed, and to understand the role that they played in an art form that we've come to understand it has been dominated by a single ethnicity. And we've seen how that has affected a long legacy in terms of learning, looking at instrumental music learning exam syllabus, looking at the actual repertoire that's included there, looking at the composers who contribute to that syllabus, to that curriculum, and going further from that, feeding progressively nicely on from that is looking at the conservatoires. How can we decolonize what's going on in terms of the curriculum in conservatoires if we're not able to bring young people into a new world of music making that really is representative of a more culturally diverse and accurately so community? This is so important, and this is why we see that this need for decolonization is so important. Even when we go past conservatoires and we look at what we see in terms of audiences, audience makeup, the staff for performances, of course the performers for the performances, and of course the repertoire for the performances. It's one great big long self-fulfilling prophecy. if we're not able to diversify at this early stage, how are we able to see the change that's necessary further on? And how are we able to welcome a more inclusive community to enjoy, to embrace a new world, an enjoyable world, a rewarding world of music that exists out there, one that for so many people remains undiscovered? In the UK, we've also seen in the world of jazz how the music has become taken over by the dominant culture. Gone is the acknowledgement of the heritage of the Southern Syncopated Orchestra, black band leaders like Ken Snake Hips Johnson, and the influx of South African musicians to Britain during apartheid. In came the music of some great white English jazz musicians who became household names, and I do mean great white English jazz musicians. We don't expect people to apologize any more for the color of their skin than we should apologize for the color of our skin. My only gripe, if I'm honest, is where is that acknowledgement of heritage? Where is the acknowledgement that enables a rich multicultural legacy for us all? Much like in the examples I gave earlier, where classical music failed to acknowledge its full heritage, so too did jazz. An art form steeped in so much history of Black African, American, and Caribbean influence is now dominated by white British culture. Mainly white students learn in mainly white conservatoires and are taught by mainly white professors. As I mentioned, just under 3% of professorial staff in conservatoires are people of color. Not only that, their administrators, their support network, all look the same. The young students who are learning to play this art form in conservatoires and higher education institutions are playing music mainly written either by themselves or other white writers, and they play in white-owned venues. I really have nothing against any single ethnicity, but this is what colonization of an art form looks like. The action of appropriating a place or domain for one's own use. So, of course, while we're not here to talk about either of those two art forms, we can hopefully see a reason why there is a similar concern for English folk music, for folk music of the home nations, of the United Kingdom, where we can see issues that question the very cultural identity of this art form. Some English folk song is steeped in oppression and documents the troubles and hardships for many a time. The same can be said for folk song of the United Kingdom at large. It's important that people don't forget the troubles faced by those economic migrants who didn't find the roads paved with gold. There are a whole wide world of folk song. Ballads, carols, children's songs, hornpipes, jigs, work songs, you name it, someone has sung a folk song about it. The folk song has been a potent way to pass down stories, thoughts, and traditions through generations. However, if folk song music in the UK is to move on, then it needs to be representative of what the United Kingdom is and is about in the 21st century, a very different place that welcomes so many different cultures. For that to be the case, I ask, what is folk song in the United Kingdom in the 21st century? It needs to champion the stories of a nationwide community now made up and acknowledged to be made up of these cultures. Some of these stories are good and some very sad, but we must all feel that we own and can enjoy this art form and not feel excluded. Belonging is important. Belonging to any community is important. Being excluded, being ostracized, whether we talk about it in those terms or whether we use a very fashionable term, but a very accurate term, institutional racism, whether we are, as people of color, precluded from involvement by the very fabric, the very mechanisms of this art form, the way it works. These are problems that we really need to acknowledge and address. All the while, we know there is a very real historical, regional identity to folk music. between the instruments, language, the musical style? Does decolonisation erode this cultural identity or rebuild a richer and wider musical ecology? This is one of a number of questions that I will ask you, because one of the things that I would like to come from today's session is I'd like this debate, this narrative, to transcend this very short period of time, a very short period of time in history. 1 hour after all is nothing. So this conversation does need to go on, and we do need to ask ourselves some very, very important questions. With the colonisation of the British Empire came the movement and influx of people from different cultures. That process of colonisation, geographically speaking, covered so many areas of living, including music, and yet there is a resistance to reversing the process and decolonising spaces, ideas, and the art form itself. The cultural identity and collective pride of these colonised communities has simply eroded, or ethnically diverse communities have celebrated their music and their history in the safety of their own communities, starving the wider United Kingdom of a wider and richer multicultural offering. The songs of British Black people through the ages, whether they be the Black sailors singing and joining in with sea shanties on British ships, the generations of Black slaves living under oppression throughout the United Kingdom, the Windrush generation, or even Sharp Intake of Breath, the songs in protest of racial inequality heard in more recent times. I argue that they should all join the canon of British folk song, and yet there is so much desire to maintain the status quo and simply to not acknowledge that British folk song is us. That is all of us. I guess the big question there is, what constitutes a folk song? There must be quite some considerable overlap between popular music and that of the traditional variety if we are able to recalibrate our thinking. Possibly you're thinking, there's no way that popular music can possibly be real folk music. I'll leave that one hanging too. There's another question for you. For me, if the song tells a story of someone, something, or a happening, and it is a narrative that can survive generation, then it's in. For me, it's folk music. History has told us that some folk song collectors and specialists were a little more sinister in their assessment of what is a folk song and who has a right to sing them. Pretty much, this was all based on the color of their skin. It's largely down to these folk song collectors, gatekeepers, if you like, of the heritage and the legacy of this art form. We can see it is now white as the driven snow. So the question has to be further asked. Is folk song representative of the people? I would also ask, is it not time that the traditional musical instruments of this idiom be reevaluated and understood in the wider multicultural context? Given the influence that folk song has had on other genres, including classical music, with some of its finest and most celebrated white composers being so affected, folk song could indeed be a real agent for change in respect to other musical genres too. The possibilities are also endless here for the more commercial folk fusion styles. What additional fusions might there be in addition to folk rock and folk punk? And coming back to classical music, we've seen the heavy influence that English folk song has had on people like Ralph Vaughan Williams. Just imagine what a newly defined understanding of folk music in the United Kingdom. Just imagine what influence that could have on today's composers and the composers of the future. Our whole sound world, as we know it, could be redefined and could be a whole new enjoyable experience that we can all buy into and we can all enjoy. Obviously, I speak about the contribution of Black people to this music over time. We are, of course, Black Lives in Music. That's who we are. That's who I'm representing today. But let's not forget and acknowledge the contribution of a much wider community to this music. On the topic of acknowledging and acknowledgement, this new and diverse canon that we talk about, we shouldn't forget, and in fact we should acknowledge the diversity that courses through the lifeblood of this music. Through history and anecdotal narrative, there is much to acknowledge by way of all of the many cultural influences and culturally diverse individuals who have contributed over time to what is now a very distilled form. In the area of race, the association of blackface with some aspects of traditional folk song and dance, of course, a practice with an innocence and honest origin has now been transformed into a very different and dark meaning. It now divides opinion and asks many questions of us as a society deemed to be progressive. The relationship between race and lyrics continues to be contentious and in places remains offensive. We must agree that this must be addressed and without delay. So how do we go about decolonizing English folk music? How do we return this music to the wider community who have always been here but have never been invited to the party? Well, we must first take a good look at ourselves and ask, what can we do? Change has to start from within. To do nothing is to remain complicit. We must all think about the change that is needed and consider the role we have played, the role we now play, and the role we can play in helping to make change. It starts with us as individuals. If we cannot find the conscience in ourselves, then we cannot expect change to happen. We can't wait for someone else each time we want to see change happen. We too must play our part, and we know that is difficult. Just think of ourselves as, in day-to-day living. I, for one, spent 20 years working as a musician, and after that carried on working in management, in a management capacity and a stage management capacity. I guess wearing black as much as the color of my skin is black has been part of me for all of my professional career. And the days when I actually have to go out and put a different colored pair of trousers on or a top on just feels strange. Ask yourself, if you have long hair and you decided to cut it short the next time, or vice versa, or you drive a certain type of car and have done for years and then decide to change to a different car. Change feels weird, and it takes real bravery and courage. Maybe not quite so important with regards to whether you change the color of the trousers that you wear, but when it comes to organizations and it comes to providing opportunities for people who, like myself, come from a background where challenge was right from the start. How do you survive? How can you get help? Who gives you support? We need to see that change come into our community so that more people can become a part of that. Perception and communication is so important to change making. Organizations of influence, folk music societies, organizations, large and small, dotted around the United Kingdom. I urge you to engage yourselves in the important discussions needed to reevaluate and redefine folk music. Forget about tradition and the very defined boundaries of folk music as expressed by each home nation, and please forget the jingoism that accompanies. Lived experience is crucial to any discussion on underrepresentation. To those organizations and societies I mentioned, you're having a lonely discussion with yourselves if you're not prepared to invite those underrepresented to join in this discussion. In fact, you're not having dialogue at all. It cannot be for these groups alone to maintain gatekeeping duties to a wider and more representative sound world, one that would be so much more edifying with the involvement of a much wider and representative community. I hope that these discussions can take place, and with them can come introspection in the sector more generally. In order to make their organizations representative, they need to diversify comprehensively. In recruitment, whilst I'm not asking for people to resign their positions or cede power, I asked you to consider succession and recruitment strategies, to be positive and honest when recruiting and at all levels. It's no good just looking at the ground up and plastering some of your websites with the odd black face at entry level in your organization. You need to look at your governance, you need to look at your senior leadership, you need to look through your organization and make change. Consider how you advertise roles, the words you use and where you advertise. Make sure your advertising has the widest reach in terms of all aspects of your community. Remember that people have transferable skills. Think about your framework, review, and reimagine how you do things. As I've mentioned, this includes governance where boards can make impactful statements by their recruitment and makeup. I know that in some geographic areas, this may be considerably harder than recruiting from a richly diverse city like London. However, we know from the experience and challenge of communicating and doing business throughout the pandemic that we can speak more easily despite geographically being in so many different places and so far apart. Equally, please do due diligence and ensure you know the local demographic where you are. Find opportunities to diversify from the locality. Very likely there will be some people who you can reach out to and get them to be involved in what you're doing. This is so important. Think about this in terms of your audiences as well. You need that buy-in. As I mentioned, there is some traditional and unhealthy reinforcement of national identity. I urge the sector to change this perception of tradition, demystify and change perception that being English, having Englishness, being Scottish, having Scottishness, being Irish, having Irishness, or being Welsh and having Welshness is an essential to being involved in the folk music of the United Kingdom. We must reevaluate our collective approach to race, ethnicity, and the purpose of the art form. Does it need to tell a story? Does it have to be about the plight of an individual or that of the oppressed? Or what is the content? Do we need to define that in some way? More questions. For a welcoming and all-embracing community, we must also re-evaluate some of our long-standing traditions, like the role of the minstrel, blackface, and agree on its place in folk music in contemporary times. On that note, I'm afraid I'm not about cancel culture. To lose the images, the sounds, the actions, the words of a bygone era is to lose history. And whether we are proud of it or not, we must not only remember our history, but we must learn from it too. British folk music has permeated the commercial music world, and the visuals of a new and accepted, dare I say, decolonised art form in the commercial arena will benefit perception and break down walls. It can be a shop window to signpost and engage a younger and wider audience. These are tomorrow's adult audiences and music professionals. We should be investing in young people with increased opportunities, initiatives, and support for their music making. We also want to show them that there is a whole world without prejudice that they can be involved in, a whole new sound world that they can embrace and enjoy. We must enable them to take interest, engage, enjoy, and seek to belong to this community and belong with pride. We also need to consider how we talk about folk music and who is doing the talking, very much in keeping with the worlds of jazz and classical music journalism. There's a paucity of folk music journalists from Black, Asian, and ethnically diverse backgrounds. Nothing that I haven't grown used to, but should it be like that? I guess that's not difficult to understand why. Currently, there is no place in this sector for people of colour at any level and in any area. This can't be right. As a national sector, we must develop a conscience and make change happen. So, for me, the need to decolonise folk music in the United Kingdom is clear. The word ownership can be a vulgar term. In the case of folk music, it feels very much that folk music is owned by one element of our community while excluding so many others. It's not a case of it's time. We're way past that point where we feel the current status of this music is rebooted to acknowledge the rich multicultural entity of folk music in the United Kingdom in the 21st century. When we talk about words like decolonisation or change, it always feels like fear enters the room. Well, as the saying goes, feel the fear and do it anyway. We cannot continue to exclude cultures and people from being involved and sharing in ownership of this music. On any level, that has to be wrong. We need to understand that decolonisation does not mean taking away, but instead it means adding to and enriching. We need to recognise that the National Bank of Folk Music has many vaults still unopened, and that its wealth could be immeasurable upon opening these doors. It's not an easy win. We all know that. Efforts to make change will take time to see benefits. People of colour have now been knocking at the door for hundreds of years. In terms of gender equality, there is often talk of a glass ceiling, but for people of colour, even the front door seems to be made of glass too. Communities have become despondent, and individuals from those communities will no doubt prefer to work and participate in their own cultural communities where they have traditionally felt most safe. Again, that can't be right. We need to work together. We need to make music together. We need to listen to music together, experience together. Change will take time, but that just makes it all the more important to start in earnest and now. Organisations are beginning to address their own inadequacies in equality, diversity and inclusion, or EDI. Those that have begun to address EDI in folk music, I salute you. But it's important to remember part of your EDI plan must include decolonisation and recruiting people of colour to your organisations. I had a recent trawl of folk music websites, just more generally throughout the United Kingdom organisations. And I continue to be disappointed but unsurprised by the lack of colour with which I see on those websites. Equally, the discussion on what is folk music and how do we involve the wider community as part of our national identity hasn't begun yet. This discussion needs to get started, and all voices in the room need to be invited to the table. They need to be both seen and heard. I mentioned earlier about change happening from within and starting with the individual. We must remember this. Organisations and institutions will not change without the desire being there, the thought and the self-questioning being there. I ask you to look around you and not accept that what you see as the norm. I speak to many, many boards, and without exception, I see a lack of diversity on those calls. Those of you who sit on boards, please, at your next meeting, stop and ask yourself, what do you see? And please ask yourself, is it okay that our board does not reflect the national demographic in the 21st century? We all need to ask ourselves those questions. What do we see? And is it okay to look like this in contemporary times? We need to ask ourselves, yes, collectively, but most importantly, as individuals, what can we do to help make change? We must take it upon us, because that is important, that we feel we have, yes, we have a role, just as I do in Black Lives in Music, and I do as a person of colour who wants to see change happen. I'd like to thank you for listening. And I hope that there is food for thought here, that individuals and organisations will wish to continue wherever they are. As I mentioned, this discussion needs to transcend this very session that we're on right now, and we need to have joined up conversations. I hope those conversations will begin to join up and become a national conversation, as indeed they need to. Actions from those conversations are a necessary part of the process. If we are able to follow this pathway, then meaningful change really is possible. It is, of course, in all of our hands. Thank you. I'd be very pleased to take any questions, should there be any, from the floor.
Thank you so much, Roger. I'm feeling particularly humbled by that. It was so thoughtful and so much personally to take on board, and I think I'm sure for everyone watching to take on board. So thank you for that. Before I jump into some of the questions that are coming into the chat, I've just got a couple myself. That if that's all right, I thought
Of
I'd take
course,
those.
yeah.
One is quite practical, and one is, I suppose, more more kind of open-ended. But I really valued the point that you made around the tradition, and we often talk about the difference between the folk canon, the traditional folk, and what is folk music today. And of course, in the 1960s and 1970s, many people moved away from the things that were written down in the early 1900s and began to focus on, I guess, economic inequalities, societal inequalities. It seems that what you're suggesting is that we need to be finding a way to actively make sure that we talk about the inequalities which are prevalent in society today, and claim them as folk music in the same way that in the 60s and 70s people did that around society and economic inequality. Is that even vaguely in the right kind of ballpark?
I think that's really absolutely right, Tom. I think we need to understand just how much change has taken place in I guess a relatively short space of time. As I've mentioned, you're talking about the 60s and the 70s and the trends that were happening there. But this need for cultural identity that we all should have, but so many of us do not feel we share in. I grew up, actually, we've got, so just topically at the moment, we've got the European Championship football going on, and I remember growing up and literally being told, and actually thinking to myself, when I used to use the collective noun we, I felt a little bit uneasy about that. And in fact, my family felt a bit uneasy about that. They pointed it out to me that, what do you mean we, kind of thing. We need to rediscover. We need to discover this cultural identity, and that needs to be as part of this multicultural collaboration that can be there, this fusion that can be there, as opposed to a sterile distillation process that has happened over, all of the years in terms of what's happened to this art form. We need to think very much more collectively, and we need to embrace other cultures as part of our own. And I think that's so important to understand and to know.
Thank you. My second question is quite practical about Black Lives in Music. As we're talking about this issue about how we decolonize folk music, what I'm aware of is that when we put out open calls, I know that English Folk Expo have not been good enough at putting those calls out to the people who might identify and say, oh, that's me. This means me. I can apply to be a trustee. I can apply for this open call. And we sit back, and I'm sure every other organization in this field who are trying to actively change but are not succeeding properly at the moment, sit back and say, nobody, there's obviously no people of color of any sort who want to apply. We know that's not true, but we try and justify it like that. However, when you talk about the work of Black Lives in Music helping with recruitment, helping with those kind of campaigns, that seems to me a fantastic opportunity for people to get involved. But on your website, it specifically says that you help with jazz and classical. Would you be turning away organizations like English Folk Expo or other genres who want your support and guidance there as well? Or is it strictly for those two genres?
Great, that's a great question. Thank you so much. So the first thing that I would say in answer to your question, I would just put a small, I would give a small example for you. It wasn't that long ago that pubs were not a place for women. Just that simple. Women didn't go into pubs. And they weren't encouraged. They were told it basically wasn't a place for them. It was a place for men. So naturally, you wouldn't necessarily expect women to want to go into pubs. And what happened a little bit further down the line, we all, something we all fell out the tree, hit our heads and realized what complete nonsense. We started to encourage women to go to pubs. We had women only nights, for example, and now we can see, well, not quite now, obviously we need to get through the pandemic, but we can see a very different world has taken place in that respect. And we can see an open and embracing community that actually embraces all of the protected characteristics just about. So I say in that same position, as I've mentioned on this this talk already, we're seeing a community that does not reflect the wider community as it really is. So that advocacy, another word that I mentioned earlier on, is so important, and we need to utilize the advocacy that comes from organizations like Black Lives in Music, because we talk to people who look like ourselves. We are talking to people who look like ourselves, and they are talking to us. And we know increasingly that more and more people of color are understanding that there is a place for them in the wider arts community, and that we can support them on that pathway. Coming back to your last question, we are about jazz and classical music. As I mentioned to you, we have a task force, and our task force represent a number of different areas of the music industry. And I should add that the 2 surveys that we've launched this year are industry-wide. They're not just jazz and classical. We want to find out about the plight of the Black experience within the industry more generally. But we want to make change, and we said to ourselves, where are we going to start? We need to start somewhere, and we talked about jazz and classical music. Tom, when you reached out to us about this talk, I was only too pleased to be involved, because decolonization, structural racism, unconscious bias, microaggressions, all of these things exist across our industry, and we want to support and help make change. So yes, we absolutely embrace the notion that organizations within the folk music sector can reach out to us. We welcome them to. Please do so. I guess the analogy that I've liked to use, just because it's quite fun, is definitely one of being a vampire and just waiting to be invited across the threshold. Tom, you've already done that with regards to this session today, and I hope it doesn't invite us the opportunity to suck blood, but actually to make good relationships and to help make change together with organizations and individuals who want to do so in this sector.
Thanks. I'm a massive fan of the analogies as well. So there's a couple of questions here. I'll read this one. It's quite lengthy, but I think it's really appropriate to what you were saying earlier on. Hi, Roger. I'm a Conservatoire student about to finish my degree. Last summer, we had quite a few conversations and panels through the student union with some staff members about diversity or lack thereof in UK conservatoires. Whilst everyone was in agreement that change should be made, no one really spoke about what can be done, and it seemed to me, unfortunately, to be a bit empty. Everyone agreed that there was a problem, but no one was going to do anything about it. Have you, as an organisation, seen much change within conservatoires in the past year? What has been most meaningful change, and what, in essence, can be immediately done?
That's an awesome set of questions, because there are a few things there, and I completely I sympathise with the feelings of that individual. Just to give you some background on that, so Black Lives in Music is now working directly or indirectly supporting at least, I think, 5 or 6 of the major UK conservatoires, and we're very pleased to be involved in that. And why is that? Why are we pleased? Because this change has to take place at all levels of the pipeline. I think, let me tell you something. I worked as an education manager some years ago at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, and I really did understand what an institution is about and how long it takes for an institution to make change. So I will say to you that there are huge amounts of conversations going on with the conservatoires that we're working with. You can find out more about who we're working with either on our website, that's blim.org.uk, or there's always amplifying of our work on socials as well. But it's very, very it's a big slog. We're talking about decolonising the curricula, both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels. We're talking at improving staff forces. We're already involved in helping with recruitment, and the first seeds of positivity are already happening. But you have to understand 97% is a very, very big number to turn around. We're also working with students of colour in those conservatoires, providing safe spaces for them to be able to talk and to come back to us with an understanding of their experiences by a platform of mutual support. And consequently, we're able to anonymously report that narrative back to the senior management, so that we're able to try and put mechanisms in place to give people support. So one thing that I will say, which is important, is there is a lot going on. There can never be too much going on, and I would say please hang on in there. I hope you're young enough within the learning scenario at your conservatoire to see change begin to happen next year. And if you are not in one of the conservatoires that is signed up with Black Lives in Music, I urge you to make contact with your senior faculty and ask them to find out more about us. Contact us. We don't bite. We're very happy to speak and have a conversation. I'm not a salesman. If you don't want to make change, or you've decided you found a better way of doing it, then good luck. And we hope to meet a bit further down the line.
Thank you for that. Next question. There's a couple of questions here. I'll just try and whisk them as fast as we can, given the time we have.
I'll be quick too.
Don't worry. Quite often, people who attend sessions like this one are people who are of the same mind, who agree with the speaker's points. How do we ensure this is spread to the people whose minds we really need to change?
As I say, it's down to the individual. That's where change starts. We need everyone on this call, everyone who views this retrospectively, to evangelize for what needs to happen. And as I say, great that, and I completely agree, the people who are already on these calls, with change comes fear. I wouldn't expect anyone who is scared of change to be on this call. So we need to understand what is the part that we can play? How can we bring change into organizations, whether that being a bit or large? You might be the chief exec on this call. You could be someone further down the food chain. But I urge you just to keep talking. This is what happened on the 25th of May. Just a huge mushrooming of discussion, and this is what needs to keep happening. And I think with organizations like ourselves, at play and growing in effectiveness, I really believe we can make some change.
Thanks. And final question, which I think should be a quick one.
Sure.
This is specifically around Black Lives in Music, engaging with some of the specific courses around folk music. So, for example, there's separate courses in Newcastle, Sheffield, Leeds, elsewhere. Is it always directly with the university or the music department, or have you engaged or worked individually with specific courses?
So we've not engaged with specific courses as yet. As I say, please reach out to us if you're interested. We are working with festivals, I think I've mentioned, and different organizations of influence, not just the conservatoires and not just the professional playing organizations themselves. So yes, we're very happy to give you some support with that. The strap line with that is reach out to us and we'll come back to you, definitely.
Great. I think we may be running out of time there. Roger, I'd just like to thank you again for coming on and for being so clear on what needs to change, and hopefully providing some direction for all of us to begin that process of change. This lecture is being recorded. It will be available on folktalkacademy.com for free for anybody to watch again, and I'm sure many of us will be as well. So for now, I'd like to thank you, Roger Wilson. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it immensely.